Rose Donahue, and we are filming at the Quantum Arc Media Studio in Las Vegas, Nevada. Today, I'll be speaking with the program director of the Videography and Film Department at the College of Southern Nevada, John Aliano. John!
Thank you, Rose. Really appreciate being here.
Welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I'm happy. I'm happy to have you here. And it's your first podcast, you told me.
It is the first podcast.
So
it's
here
wonderful.
we are. Yeah. As
right.
I was saying before, you're going to want to do so many. You might start your own.
That's
Who
right.
knows what could happen next.
I'll probably get in a lot of trouble, but we'll see what happens.
I'm sure whatever you do turns out great. So I'm sure
Thank you.
That would be a lovely
You have faith
podcast.
in me, Rose.
I've got faith.
That.
I've got faith. Tons of faith. So I was hoping that you could break down your classes for us a little bit.
Sure.
I can. So I
Go ahead.
looked them up. I see we have cinematography 1 and 2, videography 1 and 2. Do you go past 2? Is there 3 and 4 and 5?
Not yet.
Okay, just curious.
There's been some discussions, but no, it's pretty much 1 and 2 for a lot of our classes.
Okay,
Right.
just checking. So then we have documentary 2 and portfolio class. So I've been curious, what really is the difference between cinematography and videography?
Well, in terms of the classes, Cinematography 1 is a basic class for learning all the aspects of what you do with cameras and lights and the language of film as it relates to the placement of the two. And so we take you through, here are some cameras, here are fundamental things you want to learn in terms of exposure, f-stop, focus, all the things that can really go wrong unless you're trained and you know what you're looking for to get over those stumbling blocks and really understand how these work, because there's things on cameras that are universal to all cameras. So if you learn them from that point on, it's just a few buttons that change and other aspects, the size of your CCD, et cetera, and how that works. There's more, but those are fundamentally how it works there. And then with lights, it's what kind of light are you using? What is color temperature? How would you place them to get the certain effect that you want if you're filming a narrative versus a documentary versus a horror film versus a commercial? And then also to make people look really good or make them look like monsters or things like that. So, and understanding exposure. What is a good exposure for skin tone, making that look nice, how you work with people with different skin tones together in a scene. I get asked a lot of questions about those sorts of things. And a long time ago, I was tired of answering a lot of those questions, so I produced a DVD called Gelato, and I use that as a teaching tool in my classes to show people what happens when you do these various things.
Cool.
Yeah.
So lighting plays into cinematography. It's
Absolutely.
a whole big. It's how the camera and the light play together.
Yes.
In a way. Okay.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then with videography is the incorporation of all these things together. So you have elements of that. You have elements of sound because you're doing sound recording, and not to get too complex, but there's many ways to do that in terms of using a shotgun microphone or a lavalier or a placement on the counters and things like that, and then how the pickup patterns work. But also there's editing and how that works. What happens when you cut? When you put these different shots together, what do they tell you? What is montage? And then how are you going to make? And a good editor is always somebody who can elevate a film one step. So if you give them good material, they'll give you very good, filmmaking generally, or very good footage. You get excellent. You always can up the game one by an editor that knows what they're doing. So we teach some of those aspects as well. But I also talk about acting, how you work with actors.
In the videography class.
In the videography class.
Oh, okay.
Because it's important. They have actors in most of them. I mean,
Sure.
A few people will do documentaries, but mostly it's narratives, sometimes music videos. But the narratives you have to cast. So we have a good arrangement with some local companies and national companies in terms of waiving the fees so they can get actors, which is great. But then how do you work with them most effectively? So, I show them things like you have to rehearse, because if you don't do rehearsals, things go wrong when you're there on the set that day. But also the actors will be much more committed to you. They'll show up.
Yeah.
They'll attend. But if you don't have rehearsals, your chances get minimized a lot. They'll be there. Yeah.
Oh, that's a bleak aspect of things when people don't show up who say they will, but it happens.
True.
You're right. And the investment of time is important, and the rehearsals are super important.
Right.
I feel like from my experience of working on things that have done rehearsals and have not, just the feeling of being prepared is so nice, and I feel like I'm able to do my job better. I feel like I know how other people are going to do their job. I'll read a script and I'll be imagining my counterpart doing one thing, and then the actor has some other brilliant idea different from mine. That's
right.
like, oh, okay, let me just change what I'm doing because now
you might have to go with it. It's true.
Right, it's just fine.
But I think what you said is very important, preparation. So, because a lot of times these student actors will have people come in who don't know their lines, and they're in the middle of a shot, and then all of a sudden they're going, line please. Well, when you do that, you don't really understand what that character should be doing in the play or screenplay. So that's very problematic. I tell my students, your actors have one real job. We want them to be a good actor, but really it's memorizing your lines. And I said, you as directors have really one job, and that's making sure that you get the best performance that you can from your actors.
Yeah.
So if you do those two things, at minimum, generally things will work out for you. But if your actors don't know their lines, then that also reflects you, because you should have had rehearsals. And in those rehearsals, you'll know whether they know them or not, and you can work with them. And so those are some of the fundamentals, but there's a lot to it, and they trip up a lot. So I try to help them to watch the pitfalls, and so they have less of that, and they can be more successful and really enjoy the process, because we don't want it to be any harder than it has to be.
Right. No one wants anything to be harder than it has to be, right?
Exactly. Life in general. Yeah.
But that pre-production, people underestimate preparation.
It's huge.
Yeah, huge. Okay, so that would be very different for documentary, though. What is preparation like for that compared to narrative?
It is completely different. So when I talk to students in my Doc 2 class, which is a class with which you make 2 short documentaries, about 5 to 10 minutes each, we get them to look at various things. One is working with your subjects, getting to know them. Rarely do you want to just walk in and start filming. That doesn't usually produce very good results. So spend some time with your subjects, don't even have the camera, talk to them, get them to feel comfortable with you, and then you come back and then you start filming. Because once they feel like you're more a friend or fly on the wall, they'll be themselves, which is really what you want. Styles and techniques. So you're doing A roll and B roll. So A roll is usually a master interview, kind of like what we're doing right here, with them answering a number of questions related to the subject. And then B roll is everything else. It's outside, it's the street corners, it's the friend or whatever happened at the workplace or who knows what. And then that gets intercut. So actually you end up with very little A roll, but you use the audio of the A roll and you put in the B roll to layer that and to texture it and to make the documentary work. I also teach them about copyright, fair use. So you can use a lot of material that's out there if it pertains to your subject matter and legally do it. It's less so with narratives, more so with documentaries. So I show them what the law states and how you can use these things and for how long. And so they get a good idea that don't be afraid to use material that's not yours if it's in context and it relates in a certain way.
That's a interesting and important thing to have knowledge about. Because you could get in a lot of trouble if you do things wrong. But that's interesting. I didn't know that
like
about
if we're at a location and there's a background Rolling Stones song playing, but it's just incidental to what you're doing, then it's not really a problem.
Right.
But however, if you're doing a narrative film and then you hear the music, that's a big problem because it's different. It's intentional.
I was about to say you purposely picked that song for your narrative, whereas you're interviewing someone in a bar and the bar is playing whatever.
Right.
What airport? True. Who knows? Yeah.
I know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So then all of these classes lead to a portfolio class?
They pretty much do. I recommend that everybody waits to the very end. In fact, you have to really complete at least 85% of your classes to then take portfolio. And portfolio is one of the few classes in which it's interview only. So you don't even get in unless I meet with you personally.
Wow.
And you bring your transcripts, and we make sure that you have all your classes set, the appropriate grades, because if you got a not so good grade in a class, you may have to retake it before you can take portfolio. Or if your source material is not up to par for portfolio. I have made students retake classes because I didn't feel they were ready in terms of the quality of the material that was there for portfolio. Because you really have to be ready. It's not per se a class where I'm pulling out cameras and lights and other things and showing you. You need to know that by that time. And then it's really about your story. So we sit down and we go over your treatment to make sure that's working, which is a broad spectrum of ideas about how it's going to work, and then your script, which is very specific in terms of character, acts, plot line, etc. And then you move forward and you make your movie. And then we spend a lot of time in the end going over everything. So we have your rough cut that we look at, where everything is very rough. Is this working? Are scenes exposed correctly? Are your actors doing what they're doing? How is the sound? How is the editing? And then we look at a fine cut, where you should get a lot closer to your finished project, but maybe you still need to make some tweaks. And then your final film. And then that should be very polished and finished. I say to people, you need to be finished. And they kind of give me a puzzled look sometimes, but later they understand. And that means not just that you've put together your film the way you feel it should be, but that you've added on all the things that make it work, like graphics, color correction, sound mix, music mix. All these things have to happen, and it takes time.
Yeah.
It's not something you give yourself 2 days to do. That's not going to work.
No.
Weeks really
Yeah.
to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a holistic experience.
Right.
The whole big final product.
But they're very happy when it's done, usually.
I bet. Well, I'm sure it's a phenomenal experience to have, and to have something to show that you've done and have been monitoring from start to finish,
Right.
That's a really big accomplishment.
And pushed sometimes, because I do push them.
I'm
I'm
sure,
like,
I hope
okay,
so.
you're not doing enough. No excuses.
Yeah.
Don't give me an excuse. You're the director. This is your film.
Right,
It's not them that's doing something to you. It's you being prepared. And that's why I always say have a plan B, and sometimes have a plan C.
Right.
Because, something's going to happen. Your actor's going to not show up, and that's when you go to the other person in your rehearsals that hopefully you've had, and you say, you're the one I really wanted all along.
Wow.
So
as an actor, I'm going to keep that in mind next time. But I'd still be like, okay, yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah. So it sounds like they do a lot of shorts, and I noticed that
Yes.
you've done a lot of shorts. Text, Nerd and Bullies, Tamsin, The Assignment. What is it that you enjoy about making shorts? And what's the benefit to people in making them? Because they're not really money-making projects usually.
Well, sometimes they are. I mean, it just depends. On the whole, you're right. You're making them to learn your craft, and you're going to utilize those skills for some bigger job or jobs that are going to happen. But sometimes there are exceptions, like a student of ours, Billy Ward, who was in the showcase. And he did a film called Operation Rhino South Africa. And he actually went to South Africa to film it.
Oh, wow.
And he was there for, I think, 4 weeks. And he had a backpack. He couldn't weigh more than 51 pounds. So that's what he could take with him. And, so he lands, and he's with all these ex-military guys. And they're going there to help at a private preserve to protect rhinos who are being endangered, and they're being poached. So he got on with this group to show what they do, and the footage was beautiful. It's a portfolio film, obviously more advanced. And then he comes back with all the footage, hadn't done anything with it yet, and we spent hours and hours and hours going over terabytes of footage, but looking through and breaking it down smaller and smaller, and then he comes out with this beautiful gem of a film. The film ends up winning, to date, 9 film festivals.
Oh, wow.
Nobody wins 9 film festivals. I do not know any student that has ever won 9 film festivals, but this guy has won 9 film festivals and grand prize at our showcase. Well, the film turned out so well for him. Per se, it may not have made money, but it got him all kinds of job opportunities.
Okay.
Like right now, he's in, I think, South America, deep sea diving with Richard Branson. He's going to Thailand for a photo shoot shortly. I know. Going back to Africa next year.
All right.
He just finished a feature documentary on great white sharks.
Oh, cool.
This guy's working day and night. So,
all right.
And part of it is the people that viewed that film and they became sponsors.
Saw his work.
And they said, we like you. We want to help you. We want to support you. And that's what we hope happens for more students.
Cool. Okay. All right. Very cool. So partially hone your craft, partially have something to show of your work so that people can get on board with you and want to work with you.
And the key issue is that one thing leads to another. One thing always leads to another. So even when I was a student in grad school, and I shot a lot of student films, that was just something I liked doing. I was doing this one short film for another student, and I was on his father's used car lot, and it had a yellow brick road and all this stuff. It was the Wizard of Oz. So later the father comes up to me and goes, "I'd like to hire you to do a commercial for me."
Nice.
And I thought, wow, that's great. And so the next thing I knew, I was making really literally a professional commercial, rented a really nice camera, lights, got a good crew together. And he paid quite well for it, which was great.
Awesome.
And then we got it broadcast on KTLA Channel 5 there. It was wonderful to see my commercial at 2 a.m.,
Yeah.
between old Marlon Brando movie, et cetera. But, always that's the thing, is that you have to take these steps.
Yeah.
Great things don't normally land right in your lap and you go from there. You build up to it.
Of course not. Definitely.
Right.
So while we're taking a small trip down memory lane, I'd love to recognize the Emmy that you won for your lighting design.
Thank you.
That's so cool and so exciting. So did you think from a car commercial or car dealership commercial to the Emmy stage, did you see that happening in your future?
The Emmys, that's a big leap.
It's a leap.
I think part of it was just because I kept doing my craft again and again and again, I really felt confident at a certain point. I mean, I go to a lot of events and showcases and things like that. And at one point, I really felt like, wow, I don't have to go to that demonstration that's going on today. I feel like I know what they're talking about. I'm ready for those things. I can make those things happen. And I think having self-confidence is good in this field. Not arrogance, self-confidence, big difference.
Confident, not cocky, as
Yes.
my coach used to say.
Yes, exactly. So that happened to me just at that moment that I got the nomination, which was great. And so I went to Arizona with my buddy who produced the short film. It was a 3-minute film called Cold War. And I had a joy shooting that. And actually, one scene in there had rain coming down, and it was at night, and backlit the lead antagonist character on a bridge. And so the lighting was very dramatic and high contrast, and had these elements that I think really played well for the judges. And then I won. And it was terrific. And, you walk up on stage and they hand you this beautiful statue, which is gorgeous, angel holding a atom in space. And you're thinking, wow, I guess this is mine. And you're looking at the little clock that says you have 20 seconds. And so you have to kind of be ready to thank those critical people in your life. And I thanked my producer and director, and I was co-producer with him, helping make it, as well as cinematographer, which I won for lighting. And afterwards, I was surprised because I walked back on stage, and the woman took it away from me. And I go, "What are you doing?" And it was the struggle of the Emmy like this. And she goes, "I need to see your driver's license." I said, "My driver's license?" I said, "Do people steal these?" And she goes, "You'd be surprised. Sometimes they aren't here, and somebody walks up on stage and takes somebody's Emmy."
I was not expecting that.
I had no idea. So, I pull out my driver's license. She looks back and forth and says, "Okay, here you go." And I walk out with it thinking,
wild.
That's a strange encounter.
Yeah. That's so funny.
But it was wonderful. And, you walk out and it's the weirdest thing. It's like this beacon of light that just shines.
Yeah.
And everybody's walking up to you like, ooh, look at this.
That's so cool.
And so those are moments you don't forget.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
So
are there other things from your career that you look back on and you're like, I'm so glad I learned that, or I'm so glad I had that experience?
Wow. I think there's so many because you never know.
It's hard to pick one.
I remember I was driving to work one day, and I lived in San Francisco. I lived just north of San Francisco, and I taught in San Francisco for 12 years. So driving there one day, I heard the story about somebody was talking about the arc of life, and he said it's like a bow and an arrow, and that if you take that bow and arrow and you just move it 1 degree and you let it go, your entire life changes. Where it lands, where you land. And I thought that was very appropriate because I've had all these wonderful experiences. I've met all these amazing people. I've taught hundreds of workshops up in the Bay Area. And at one of them just happened to be somebody from Pixar Animation Studios.
Cool.
And he said, "John, you should come teach for us." And I said, "Pixar, you make animation. What am I going to do for you?" And he goes, "Well, we have Pixar University, and you could be a teacher and show us how to make movies just like you do here." I thought, okay. And so we got started, and little did I know, for 4 years I'd be teaching, sporadically, but teaching these really brilliant minds who design the software and come up with these ideas and make these amazing Academy Award-winning movies, how to make narrative-type movies with actors. and we had a great time. It was a blast. I loved being on the Pixar lot in Emeryville and learning from these people. So I think being a teacher, which is what I've been, pretty much equal measure of cinematographer and now producer, it's a two-way street. You know, they teach you as much as you teach them. And that's what's been so great about life and meeting these great people. And you really feel good. You just do. It's a career with which, if you give yourself into it, because it's not something you just dabble into, you got to go for it, you could be very happy.
Well, that's very beautiful. Thank you. And that is such a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Been a pleasure, Rose.
Oh, good.